Hey y'all, welcome back and thanks for stopping by. My name's Stephanie, and in today's video I'll be showing y'all how I made these faux metal pumpkins using cookie sheets from the Dollar Tree. For this project I started with one of the cookie sheets from the 2-pack that I picked up at Dollar Tree. I started by using a pair of old scissors to cut the edges off the cookie sheet. I made sure to try and cut as close to the design as possible. Please be careful when doing this, these cookie sheet edges can be sharp. Again, I want to thank y'all for stopping by and spending part of your day with me, and a huge thank you to all my wonderful subscribers. Y'all mean the world to me. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Click that button and stick around for a bit. I have a bunch of fun projects on the way. Once I had the edges removed, I used a plastic ruler to measure out the width of the pumpkin sections. I measured from the outside of the raised edge in the middle of the ruler over to the edge. Once I had the ruler in place on the cookie sheet, I took a mechanical pencil and used it to draw a straight line the length of the cookie sheet. Then I took a pair of scissors and cut it out. For the large pumpkin, I cut out 8 strips that were roughly 13 inches long. After I had all 8 strips cut out, I took a hole punch and punched a hole in both ends of all 8 strips. I made sure to punch the hole far enough in on the strips so that it would be easy to hot glue the strips together later. Next, using folk art brushed metal in the color brushed silver and a coarse paintbrush, I gave all 8 strips 2 light coats, letting them dry between coats. I did make sure to paint both the front and back of the strips because they will be seen once the pumpkin is put together. Once the silver paint was dry, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color pumpkin and a smaller brush and went around the edges of the strips. Again, I made sure to do the same thing on the front and the back. I wanted to give these pumpkins the look of rustic metal pumpkins with a hint of color. After the paint was dry, I took the strips out and gave them a good coat of matte Mod Podge sealer. For the pumpkin leaves, I used one of the leaves off a Dollar Tree pumpkin pick and traced around it on a cookie sheet, then cut it out. I did end up making 2 of these leaves for each pumpkin. For the smaller pumpkin, I used the same leaves, but when I cut them out, I cut them out a little bit smaller. After I had the leaves cut out, I used the brushed silver paint and gave both leaves 2 light coats on the front and back. Next, I took some Waverly chalk paint in the color moss and went around the edges of the leaves on the front and back, just like I did with the pumpkin sections. Once the leaves were completely dry, I took them outside and gave them a good coat on the front and back of the matte Mod Podge spray. Then I took one of the 12-inch wooden dowels from Dollar Tree and painted a little over half of it with the brushed silver paint. Next, I took 2 of the tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree and painted them with the apple barrel paint in the color chocolate bar. Once all the paint and sealer was completely dry, it was time to assemble the larger pumpkin. To give the strips a curve like a pumpkin, I took the strips and wrapped them around a can of Febreze that I had sitting on the table. But you can use anything that would give the strips a circular shape like a glass, a rolling pin, or anything like that. Next, I took the wooden dowel and placed one end of one of the strips on the bottom using the hole I'd punched earlier, and measured out how tall I wanted the pumpkin to be, then marked the spot on the dowel. Then I took a pair of miter shears and cut the dowel rod a little bit above the spot I had marked. Once I had the dowel cut to size, I then put the strips onto the dowel. This part is a bit tricky because the dowel rod is a bit bigger than the holes, but if you use just a tad bit of pressure, it will go on with no problem. After I had the first strip in place, I put a small dab of hot glue on the underside of the top strip so that it would hold in place. I didn't put any hot glue on the bottom of the pumpkin until all the strips were put in place and glued at the top. Once I had the first strip glued in place, I continued placing the strips on the dowel rod, alternating them so that they mirrored each other, and gluing the top pieces together until I had all 8 strips in place. I do want to mention that I'm using Gorilla Hot Glue, and it holds these cookie sheets together with no problem. Be sure that you have them where you want them before you put the glue on them, because they will not come back apart, and you won't be able to reposition them. I learned that the hard way. After all 8 strips were on and glued together at the top, I turned the pumpkin over and made sure all the strips were on the dowel rod, and then added some hot glue to the dowel rod in the last strip to hold it in place. Then I went through and hot glued each end down into place. This is how the pumpkin should look once all 8 sections are glued into place. Next, I took some wire cutters and snipped off the top of the dowel rod at the top of the pumpkin. For the stem of this pumpkin, I'm using an old spring that I found in my dad's shop, but you could use a piece of a stick, twine, or wire to make your own spring-like stem. I used a generous amount of hot glue to hold the stem in place. Hot glue worked great for me, but if you would prefer a more secure and long-term hold, you could use E6000 or some other long-lasting adhesive. I then used hot glue to attach the 2 leaves to the top of the pumpkin once I was happy with the placement. Since I wanted this pumpkin to stand on its own, I took the 2 tumbling tower blocks I painted earlier, glued them together, and then used hot glue to glue them to the bottom of the pumpkin. And since it just wouldn't be a pumpkin without tendrils, I took some dark colored wire that I also got from my dad and wrapped one long piece around one of the wooden dowels for the long tendril, and then repeated the same steps using a smaller piece of wire for the shorter tendril. Once I was happy with the placement of the tendril, I used some hot glue to glue it into place. Then, once both tendrils were in place, the large pumpkin was finished. I absolutely love the rustic look of this pumpkin. To make the smaller pumpkin, I used the exact same process, except I cut the strips to 10 inches long and I cut the two leaves a little bit smaller. I also used a smaller spring for the stem. This is how the smaller pumpkin turned out. I absolutely love it. Y'all, I am so thrilled with how these pumpkins turned out. They were so quick and easy to make, and best of all, both of them together only cost about $2. I love the rustic look and feel of these pumpkins and can't wait to display them with the rest of my fall decor. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it and want to see more content like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it, and follow me over on Instagram. I'll leave that info in the description box below. I'll see y'all next time.